Welcome to AppleKnows channel. I am Apple, and today I will take you on a journey through some of the most mind-bending food records ever achieved, stories so strange that you will find yourself questioning how they were even possible. Imagine me, a simple apple, telling you about meals so gigantic that entire towns could feast from them, and others so tiny that you would need a magnifying glass just to spot them. These are not legends, but real events recorded in history. Let's start with something huge. In 2012, in Germany, a group of bakers created the largest hamburger in the world. It weighed over 3,000 pounds, that's about the weight of a small car. Imagine layers of beef, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, cheese, and a bun so enormous that it had to be baked in sections and assembled with cranes. Hundreds of people gathered just to witness this mountain of food, and when it was finally served, it was enough to feed thousands of mouths. Now compare that with something tiny. Did you know that the world's smallest sandwich was crafted using nanotechnology? Scientists at the University of Nottingham managed to create a sandwich that measured less than the width of a single human hair. It had miniature slices of bread, cheese, and even a tiny bit of ham, so small that no human could ever taste it. It was not made for eating, but to demonstrate the extreme limits of what technology can build. Just imagine a sandwich invisible to the naked eye. Back to massive creations. In 1997 in Mexico, a team of chefs built the world's largest taco, stretching more than 35 feet long. Filled with tons of meat and onions, it was so huge that it looked more like a rolled-up carpet of food than a taco. And people did not just stare at it, they ate it until nothing was left. But here is something that shocks most people. In Italy, the largest pizza ever made covered more than 13,500 square feet. To put that in perspective, that is larger than many airplane hangars. What makes it even more unbelievable is that it was completely gluten-free. The chefs had to prepare and bake it piece by piece, then assemble it like a giant edible puzzle. The name of this creation was Ottavia, and it could feed a small city. On the other end of the spectrum, there exists a Guinness World Record for the smallest cake. A Japanese chef created one using microscopic tools, and it measured less than a single millimeter. It had layers, frosting, and decorations, all too small for a human mouth. It was proof that even food can enter the microscopic world, becoming more art than nourishment. And when it comes to drinks, the largest cup of coffee ever brewed was in South Korea in 2014. It held over 3,700 gallons, enough caffeine to keep an entire army awake for days. The cup itself was taller than a human, and the aroma could be smelled from streets away. At the same time, there are also records for the smallest servings. Scientists in Switzerland have managed to make the tiniest chocolate bar ever recorded, with engraved details visible only under a microscope. Nobody could ever eat it, but it remains one of the most fascinating edible experiments. Every one of these extremes shows just how far human creativity can go, from feeding thousands with one giant creation to proving that even the tiniest piece of food can exist if the right tools are used. And I, Apple, am only at the beginning of this journey with you, because the world of strange, unbelievable food records is much larger and stranger than you might ever imagine. In the world of unbelievable food records, size is not just about spectacle, it is about pushing limits. Take for example the largest bowl of pasta ever created. In 2015, chefs in Poland built a bowl strong enough to hold more than 17,000 pounds of spaghetti. Imagine standing next to a container taller than a house, filled with endless noodles. It was not just a display, they cooked it properly with sauce and cheese, and it was shared among thousands of people. One bowl, a sea of pasta. But on the opposite side, scientists in Japan once prepared the smallest sushi ever seen. Using precision tools, they crafted a single piece of sushi only a few millimeters in length. The rice grains were so tiny they were shaped one by one under a microscope. You could balance this sushi on the tip of a needle. It was never meant to be eaten, but to show mastery and patience. Bread also has its extremes. In Brazil, bakers achieved a Guinness record by creating a loaf of bread that weighed more than 3,400 pounds. It took a team of over 60 people to mix, knead, and bake it. The oven had to be specially constructed just to hold the dough. The smell of fresh bread filled the entire town for days, and once sliced, it fed thousands. Yet in contrast, the smallest loaf of bread ever baked was the size of a fingernail, also made using micro-baking experiments. And then there is ice cream. The largest ice cream scoop in history weighed over 3,000 pounds and was created in the United States. It was so heavy that a forklift was required to move it. Imagine a scoop of vanilla ice cream bigger than a car, melting slowly under the sun. Crowds gathered not just to look, but to taste a piece of what was essentially an edible monument. Compare that with the smallest ice cream cone ever made in Japan, which was so tiny it could fit inside the eye of a sewing needle. Yes, an entire cone, ice cream included, balanced in the smallest space imaginable. Even drinks have fascinating records. In Argentina, the largest glass of orange juice ever served held more than 1,500 gallons. The glass itself was taller than a human and reinforced with steel to hold the weight of the liquid. Meanwhile, the tiniest cocktail ever recorded was served in a miniature glass no larger than a coin, garnished with an olive so small you could barely see it. And when it comes to meat, the world's largest sausage, made in Romania, stretched over 38 miles long. Think about that, a single sausage so long that if you laid it out straight, it could connect two cities. It required an unbelievable amount of meat, spices, and manpower to prepare. On the other side, in the world of miniatures, chefs have produced sausages so small they are measured in millimeters, barely enough to touch the tip of your tongue. As AppleKnows, I find it fascinating that humans go to such extremes. Food, something we all need for survival, becomes an arena of records where size can amaze, shock, and inspire. And these are not isolated events, because around the world, people are constantly attempting to outdo each other with bigger and smaller creations. Let's dive deeper, because some of the strangest food records are the ones that sound almost impossible. Take for example the largest omelette ever made. In Turkey in 2010, a team of chefs used over 430,000 eggs to cook one massive omelette. It weighed more than 6 tons. Imagine the amount of heat, pans, and teamwork required just to keep it from burning. It was so enormous that it looked more like a construction project than breakfast. And yet on the opposite side, Japanese chefs once crafted the tiniest omelette using only a single quail egg, frying it with a needle-sized spatula under a microscope, creating breakfast fit for an ant. And then there's chocolate. Italy once held the record for the largest chocolate bar, weighing nearly 12,000 pounds. It was taller than most humans when stood on its side, and big enough to feed an entire festival for days. The smell of cocoa was said to drift through the streets like a dream. Compare that with the smallest chocolate ever created in Switzerland, a bar no bigger than a grain of rice, carved with microscopic precision. You could hold 100 of them on the tip of your finger. Cakes too have an unbelievable scale. The largest wedding cake ever made, in Connecticut, weighed more than 15,000 pounds and stood taller than a 2-story house. Decorated with sugar flowers and intricate layers, it was so big that ordinary knives could not cut it, saws had to be used. Meanwhile, the tiniest wedding cake on record was a microscopic 3-tiered cake crafted with sugar crystals under a scanning electron microscope. It looked perfect, but it could never be eaten. And how about fruit? In Japan, the most expensive and oversized watermelon, known as the Densuke watermelon, can weigh more than 20 pounds and sell for over $6,000 each. These rare black-skinned watermelons are considered a luxury item, auctioned like fine art. Meanwhile, the tiniest watermelon ever grown is less than 2 inches long, small enough to sit comfortably in the palm of a hand like a marble. Even drinks enter this bizarre world. In the United States, the largest margarita ever made filled a glass more than 8 feet tall, holding over 10,000 liters of cocktail. It took thousands of limes, gallons of tequila, and an enormous glass that had to be supported with scaffolding. And yet, the smallest cocktail, prepared in London, was served inside an eyedropper, sipped through a needle-like straw. And of course, pizza returns to the stage. Did you know the longest pizza ever made stretched for over a mile in California in 2017? Bakers rolled out endless dough, laid toppings across it, and cooked it using conveyor ovens set up along the road. It was an edible highway of cheese and tomato. On the other extreme, miniaturists in South Korea have baked the smallest pizza, just 2 centimeters wide, topped with microscopic pepperoni slices cut from grains of sausage. What amazes me most, as Apple telling you this story, is how these records are not just about food, but about human imagination and ambition. From using cranes to lift hamburgers, to microscopes to sculpt sugar, people will always chase extremes that shock the world. Then let's go further, because the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Consider cheese, for example. In 2018, in Wisconsin, the largest block of cheddar cheese ever created weighed more than 57,000 pounds. That's heavier than a military tank. It took months to age, and when finally unveiled, it required forklifts just to move it. On the opposite side, scientists have crafted the tiniest cheese cubes under a microscope, so small you could fit dozens of them onto a single grain of rice. A cheese platter invisible to the naked eye. Rice has also entered the record books. In India, the largest serving of fried rice ever cooked weighed over 17,000 pounds. Hundreds of chefs worked together, cooking in massive steel pans that looked like swimming pools. The smell alone filled the air for miles, and the rice fed entire communities. Meanwhile, the smallest sushi rice rolls ever made in Japan were each thinner than a toothpick, rolled with precision tools and requiring hours of concentration just to complete one. And when it comes to sweet extremes, the largest lollipop on record, made in California, weighed over 7,000 pounds. It was taller than a building and had to be supported on a steel frame to keep it upright. It was cherry-flavored and large enough that licking it would take years. In contrast, the tiniest lollipop ever created in South Korea was so small it could fit comfortably on the head of a pin. A candy made for a microscope rather than a child. Eggs themselves have shocked the world. The largest scrambled eggs ever prepared were made in Portugal, using more than 145,000 eggs and filling a pan wider than a swimming pool. Thousands of people ate breakfast together from one pan. On the opposite side, the smallest egg dish ever recorded was cooked in Japan using quail eggs shrunk into droplets, fried with tweezers under a microscope. And here's one of the strangest records of all. In the Philippines, the largest serving of mango float dessert was prepared, weighing more than 20,000 pounds. Entire trucks of mangoes, cream, and graham crackers were used, creating a dessert the size of a warehouse floor. But in Japan, culinary artists have made mango floats in a teacup, desserts so tiny you need tweezers to even lift a spoonful. Drinks have their curiosities too. In 2012, Las Vegas created the largest mojito ever recorded, mixing over 2,800 gallons in a giant glass with mountains of mint and lime. It was so big that divers had to stir it with paddles like they were rowing a boat. Meanwhile, in miniature kitchens online, creators have made mojitos inside thimbles, where a single drop of soda water completes the drink. What strikes me, as Apple speaking to you, is how these extremes create two parallel worlds, one where food becomes so massive it could feed an entire nation, and another where it becomes so tiny it vanishes before you even taste it. Both sides exist, both real, both celebrated. Let's push deeper into this bizarre universe of food extremes, because some of the records sound more like science fiction than reality. Take the world's largest bowl of soup. In 2014, in Poland, chefs prepared nearly 5,000 gallons of traditional sour rice soup. The pot was so massive it looked like a small swimming pool, and stirring it required wooden paddles taller than the chefs themselves. On the microscopic end, Japanese culinary artists once crafted the smallest bowl of ramen ever made, complete with noodles, broth, and even tiny slices of pork all inside a dish smaller than a coin. It could sit comfortably on the tip of your finger. Then there's fruit juice. In 2012, China set the record for the largest glass of freshly squeezed orange juice, holding more than 1,500 gallons. Oranges were juiced by machines around the clock until the container looked like a giant swimming pool of citrus. Yet in Switzerland, artists created a glass of orange juice so small it was served inside a droplet of resin, frozen in time as an edible display no bigger than a raindrop. The world of baked goods brings another shock. In the United States, the largest brownie ever baked weighed over 200 pounds, the size of a mattress. People cut it into pieces so large each square could feed a family. On the other hand, micro-bakers have produced brownies so tiny they can balance on a grain of sugar, with layers of chocolate that can only be seen under magnification. Seafood records are just as strange. In Vietnam, chefs prepared the largest serving of pho, the famous noodle soup, using thousands of pounds of broth, meat, and noodles. The bowl was so gigantic it was placed in a stadium for everyone to watch as it cooked. Meanwhile, the smallest pho ever crafted was made in miniature cooking studios in Japan, where noodles were thinner than human hair and the broth was made from a single droplet of stock. Even fast food has its extremes. In the Philippines, the largest serving of fried chicken ever created weighed more than 1.7 tons. Whole teams of chefs fried chicken non-stop, stacking it into mountains. Imagine fried chicken piled so high it looked like a fortress. Meanwhile, in South Korea, miniature cooking artists made a single piece of fried chicken small enough to balance on the edge of a chopstick. And ice cream makes another shocking appearance. In Italy, the largest ice cream cone ever built stood nearly 10 feet tall, a towering sculpture of waffle and cream that had to be held upright with hidden supports. It looked more like a monument than a dessert. Compare that with the smallest cone ever produced in Japan, which was smaller than a pencil eraser, with a perfectly shaped swirl of ice cream on top. As AppleKnows, I see that humans chase both ends of the spectrum with equal passion, massive food spectacles that can feed cities and microscopic creations that exist just to prove it can be done. Each one tells a story not just about eating, but about creativity, competition, and the need to amaze. Then let's keep going, because the more you explore, the more unbelievable it gets. Consider breadsticks. In Italy, bakers once created the longest breadstick ever recorded, stretching more than 400 feet in length. Imagine a breadstick longer than a football field, carried carefully by dozens of people to keep it from snapping. On the other end of the spectrum, miniature bakers have produced breadsticks so small they could pass through the eye of a needle, crisp and golden, but invisible to anyone without a magnifying glass. Now think about cookies. In 2003, in North Carolina, the world's largest chocolate chip cookie was baked, weighing more than 40,000 pounds and stretching over 100 feet in diameter. A cookie so huge it had to be baked in sections and assembled like puzzle pieces. But in contrast, in Japan, the smallest cookies on record were smaller than sesame seeds, with tiny chocolate chips crafted under microscopic tools. One cookie crumb was bigger than the cookie itself. Let's move to drinks again, because the records there are equally wild. In Italy, the largest cappuccino ever prepared filled a giant cup with more than 4,000 gallons of coffee in milk foam. Baristas stood on ladders just to pour in the ingredients. Meanwhile, in miniature labs, the tiniest cappuccinos are served in thimble-sized cups with latte art drawn by using needles dipped in coffee. The heart in the foam is so small it looks like a speck of dust. And then, pizza shows up once more. In Rome, chefs once baked a rectangular pizza so long it stretched over a mile through the streets. It was baked section by section, with wood-fired ovens on wheels, and crowds lined up along the road to take a slice. But in South Korea, miniature chefs created pizzas so tiny they used tweezers to place microscopic toppings, with one slice smaller than your fingernail. Desserts also break records in surreal ways. In India, the largest laddu, a traditional sweet made from flour and sugar, weighed more than 60,000 pounds. It was so large that cranes had to lift it, and it was distributed among thousands of people during a festival. Meanwhile, the smallest laddu ever made in a micro kitchen could balance on the tip of a matchstick, looking more like a bead than food. Even hamburgers come back into the spotlight. While the largest weighed thousands of pounds, as I mentioned before, the smallest hamburger officially crafted was made in Japan, measuring less than an inch across. It had real bread, beef, lettuce, and cheese just shrunken into a bite fit only for a doll. And one more shocking record, the largest sushi roll ever made in Russia stretched more than a mile long. Hundreds of chefs worked side by side, rolling endless sheets of rice and seaweed into what looked like a black and white train across the ground. On the other extreme, the smallest sushi rolls, crafted under microscopes, are made with grains of rice so tiny they must be split with blades thinner than a hair. What fascinates me as Apple is how every one of these records, whether massive or microscopic, reflects obsession. People build foods so gigantic that they need cranes to move them, and others create foods so tiny they need microscopes to see them. Both sides are equally real, equally strange, and equally unforgettable. And so, here we reach the end of this journey. From hamburgers as heavy as cars to sushi rolls stretched longer than city blocks, from desserts the size of houses to foods so microscopic they vanish before the eye can catch them, the truth is clear: food is not only about eating, it is about imagination, spectacle, and the human drive to do what no one has done before. I am Apple, and this was AppleKnows channel. Thank you for staying with me through the world's strangest extremes. Until next time, keep your curiosity hungry, because reality often serves us the most unbelievable dishes of all.